Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to episode 3 of Collective Contest. We have a special guest today, resident pro Ryan Connolly of Film Riot, but also he has directed 15 short films now.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, so I'm so excited to announce his epic contest that he's doing. He's going to bring some insights. What is the title of the contest?
It is the Action Scene Challenge.
Action Scene Challenge. So there's $10,000 worth of prizes, but also I think this is going to give a good opportunity for them to flex their filmmaking skills.
For sure.
Get some feedback from you, because it's not all about the prizes, even though there are really good prizes.
Prizes aren't bad.
Prizes aren't bad.
Prizes are all right.
So yeah, we're going to kick this off, kind of talk about the contest, and also kind of dissect your entire career.
My God. It all started one rainy night.
Yes, tell us how it started. But let's start with the Action Scene Challenge. Let me know kind of the premise. What are we working with here? It has to do with action, so I'm thinking explosions. Maybe car chases.
Yeah.
Give us some insight.
I mean, action, there's a lot of avenues you could take with action. So the idea is to leave it pretty wide open with the restriction of, 60 seconds. So it does add that restriction to you, which I think having restrictions like that is really helpful. Putting yourself in some kind of a box really helps you think more creatively and problem solve more. And oftentimes comes up, you come up with better things. But as far as, the action scene you choose goes, do whatever you want. It could be fight. It could be, a gunfight, hand to hand, a car chase, a foot chase. It could be anything within the realm of action, shot however you want. The idea is just to be creative and be you. Use your voice. What's your version of an action scene? How you see that sort of thing, and just be as creative as possible.
So you obviously have a lot of experience with shooting, sometimes being in action sequences, maybe not for your short films, but on your YouTube channel.
Right.
You do a lot of fun stuff and explaining how to do things with filmmaking. And so do you have any advice for people out there who want to hit those criteria that you're grading? So let us know what the criteria is, but also advice on how to hit those points.
Yeah, so the criteria is we're looking at cinematography, the editing, of course, the sound design, and just overall creativity. And cinematography, it's not about trying to be super art house or whatever it is. If it's art house, that's great, but it has to fit the tone. Every criteria sort of lands in the same place of, oftentimes I'm sure you've seen, exactly what I'm talking about. Things just don't feel cohesive. They don't feel like they belong in the same thing. So there's this clear lack of understanding of, their vision, the voice. That's what I mean by voice. What is your vision? What is the thing you're trying to pinpoint? And do that. Don't try to be other things. I think that's when you get stuff that doesn't feel like they go together. It could be a weird mashing of things, but those things can be cohesive when they feel like this unique, unified vision, the specific vision. And that's really what I'm looking for across the board. And even beyond that, are you engaging your audience? In any kind of a set piece, which an action scene is a set piece, horror set piece, a comedic set piece, a dramatic set piece, anything where you're really trying to hook your audience for that moment, you have to have an understanding of how to grab them and hold on to them. And, that unique cohesive vision is a huge portion of that. With editing, it's pacing. If the pacing drags too much, if it's too quick, then I'm pulled out and I'm thinking about that fact. So, you're trying to hit that bullseye on every point that you possibly can. And I think the best way to go about hitting that bullseye is just to be honest with what you're making. Don't try to be something else. Get inspiration from other things. We're doing something kind of like this action scene from this film, but, study that, see what they did, but then make it your own. And if you do that, I think that's when you really come up with something special.
Yeah. You actually made a recent video that was breaking down an action scene of a movie scene, and you had some really good nuggets in there. So maybe we can link that video also in the description of this. I think it's really helpful for people to go watch that. But one of the favorite things that you said, you talked about pacing, you talked about beats. And I think people think action, they're like, okay, it's gonna be constant.
Go,
right? Talk a little bit about the importance of pacing. What does that mean in terms of maybe the edit or how you shoot things, how you break it down?
Sure. I mean, there's different avenues of pacing of what we could talk about too. Pacing just, I'm going to throw a punch, you're going to block it, and then I'm going to throw another punch. Well, if you let that drag too much, I'm going to feel that, and you're not going to feel the intensity. You want sort of a hyper realism to that moment, crossing realism just a little bit to feel it, because you're more you're wanting to go in more of what it feels like to be in that moment than what it literally looks like. Maybe you do want to go with it, what it literally looks like, but that would be a unique vision in and of itself. But oftentimes, and certainly my style, is you want to know what it feels like to be in that fight scene, not what it's, because if you watch an actual fight of two people, it's kind of boring. Everybody looks really slow. It's not super intense.
Yeah.
So you're not trying to land what it looks like to be standing on a sidewalk watching two drunk people fight.
You want to see what it looks like. You want to be in the middle of it. You want to feel the energy.
What did that feel like? And then accomplish that. So, it's maybe you're landing the punch twice like we showed in that that scene, but then pacing the moment itself, if it's just fight for 60 seconds, we're going to get bored. You're going to get tired. If you've ever watched a big action sequence and there's all these visual effects happening and you're like, why don't I care? And that's probably because the volume was at a 10 for way too long and they didn't bring it back down. So, it's like a song. You don't have a chorus for 3 minutes. The chorus is great, but the
it's
verse
because of the build
leads,
up,
right. You got the verse, it leads it to the bridge, and then boom, they hit you with the chorus.
Right.
And the scenes should be very much like that. You get the chorus of this, this great moment, and then you bring it back down. Let us breathe for a second. Let us connect with, your character for a moment. Are they losing? Are they winning? Let us know that. And then, ramp back into it. So having those hills and valleys is a great way to think of it. You're not constantly at the top of the hill. You need to come back down to the valley. And finding that sort of pace is really going to be what lands that connection with your audience that I was talking about.
Yeah. And I think it being 60 seconds is really great because even in movies, when I was kind of observing action scenes, really they're, around maybe minute and a half. And that's still enough time to have the epicness, to have the breathing, to have the look up. You can have dramatic looks. It doesn't just have to be swinging at all times. So I think the 60-second is a good time to hit. So I'm excited to see what people can do with that. So the contest opens on June 24th, closing and the judging begins on July 29th. Ryan himself is going to judge many of these submissions, and the winner is announced August 5th. And so I think the last little quirk of the contest, you have to make sure to say at least one of the 4 dialogues that you've written down. So logistically, it's so we know you're not recycling content.
Yeah.
But
it also, it's adding in one more of those restrictions.
Yeah.
You have to creatively figure out how to, put that in. And, when you move on into Hollywood, you're working with producers, you're working with a team, even outside of Hollywood, when you're working with these teams, those things are imposed on you. I mean, not specifically a line of dialogue maybe, but sometimes an actor wants to just say something and you have to figure out how that fits into the moment and collaborate in that way. So essentially, we're thinking of it as you're collaborating with us. These are the restrictions we're putting on. You have to fit in these things. So it's almost like we're acting as the producer in a way.
Exactly. What is one thing that you would say to filmmaker Ryan 10 years ago?
Shake the camera a little less. We did an action scene or an action short film early on that the shaking went a bit much. It was a little too boring film. It was like, all right, rope it in. I do like shaky cam. I still use it every now and again, but within reason. At that time, it was like, I don't even know what I'm looking at. So, that, but I mean, other than that, just make a ton of stuff, keep making things, do more. I mean, even for this, the first thing you shoot doesn't have to be the thing you enter, right? You could shoot a couple of things and learn from each and then enter your best one. That's always, my advice and, for anything at all is just make more things. The more you make, the more you learn. And then, beyond that, it's really about the style that you're choosing. If you go shaky, don't go so shaky we don't know what's going on, because editing is a thing. There can be a moment where you're doing this on a lower level with people who don't really do fight scenes, say, for instance. So there is the, temptation to shake the camera like crazy to get around that. But, don't forget, you can punch in, you can add shake and post, you can cut more, and that will clean up a lot of these issues as well. So instead of shaking your camera more to solve those problems, which again, I like shaky camera, but sometimes it can go a little too far, consider where you can cut around to clean up some of those things. And you can speed ramp. I do that even when working with professional stunt teams. I speed ramp everything. So do they. That's a normal thing to do in action. You just got to be cautious how much you use it because it can start looking unnatural.
It's not always like
so there are those tricks that you can do to get around that stuff. But if you're going to shaky cam, it's going to get a little difficult to speed ramp because then it's going to get really obvious.
Right.
So, if you're doing something like a chase scene or a car chase and you're going to want to speed that up to really feel that. We did a car chase where we were like we could only go 30 miles an hour because of the road, and we had to make that feel intense and fast. So I knew I was going to be ramping.
So you sped it up in post.
A lot.
Interesting.
A lot. And actually in Ballistic, we sped up all the car stuff in post because we couldn't get the cars that fast because of the road there as well. And because we knew that, we tried to make the cameras as still as possible. That way that wasn't giving, our trick away.
So that's super fascinating. My brain hasn't even gone there. So there's a lot of practical things you can do, adding shake and editing. When I learned in Premiere, you can literally have a plugin that makes a shot on a tripod actually look like it has movement, like it's a shoulder cam.
Yeah, Red Giant has a plugin that'll do it for you. That's great. Rampant Design has a preset pack that you can get for Premiere that has a bunch of different versions that are organic, which is great.
Right.
I think both are built out that way, that they're done from actual organic camera movement, and then they track that and add it so it feels realistic. It doesn't feel like when you add it yourself, it just kind of feels robotic.
Right.
It feels very organic.
Yeah. Well, let's get in the weeds for the folks at home who are watching this, because you might have an advantage now if they want to film that car chase. And hey, the speed limit's 35 in their neighborhood, right? What are kind of the logistics with the actors? I mean, do the actors driving the car, do they have to act differently? Or is it really something, do you have to cheat in the camera, or you just have to make sure it's super steady? Is that kind of the
I mean, you want to go steady because if you're probably going to want to speed that up. I mean, first and foremost, it's all about safety. Safety first, especially if you're going to do a car chase sort of thing. You need to make sure you have command over that road. You need to make sure everyone's being responsible. It's great to have, if you're doing a stretch of road, you have someone with a walkie at the start, someone with a walkie at the beginning, so everybody knows what's going on. People are staying out of the street. Most important thing when doing action of any kind is, because it can get very dangerous, is safety, making sure you and your crew are safe at all times. Nothing is worth anybody's health. Ever.
$10,000 worth of prizes, yes, but not worth.
But when doing the car chase, if you get lower to the ground and you can feel that movement, that's when it's going to feel fast. You could be going 80 miles an hour, and if your camera's too high, you're going to be shocked how slow that feels.
Interesting.
So the closer you get to the ground to where you're feeling that movement, 30 miles an hour can start even in camera feeling more like 60. So get that really low, getting close, having a lot of cuts, within reason. All those things are really going to help you. And again, keeping the camera steady so you can then boost that in post to take your 35 miles an hour to 65 miles an hour is going to help you out a lot. And then you can, if you're steady, you can add that camera shake in post, and that's going to help hide that ramp up a lot more, because the camera shake's going to be normal and organic and everything's sped up, but that's going to trick your audience a bit more to
it's like
ignore
you're
that.
A professional or something. You know what you're
did
doing.
It before once.
Yeah, once. Well, I mean, speaking of that, let's kind of dive into your latest film, Ballistic. It was action-packed.
Yeah.
It's definitely action-packed, and there's a lot of running around, there's guns, there's chases, right? And so you actually had a pretty big crew on this. How many people were you working with? Well,
we had 2 shoots. We had one in LA and one in Texas. In LA, we had, I think it was a little over 100 people at one point. And in Texas, we had, I think it was like 35, 40.
Okay.
So that was a much smaller, that was kind of the thriller section. Right. And I mean, to our point before, Ballistic has a lot less action than it has everything else. The drama and the thriller moments actually take up the majority of that, which build to our action beats, which makes the action beats, hopefully, exciting for the audience, because you're creating that build. You're not just all action.
What was the difference between working with a 100-person crew versus the 30-person crew versus maybe just you and a few people making a YouTube video? What are those jumps? What are the biggest differences?
It doesn't feel that different, strangely enough, because when you're in the weeds, you're just worrying about telling your story, and whatever you have to do in that moment to tell that story, great. If that means me moving a stand, I'm moving a stand. If it means we're on a 100-person crew and no one will let me touch anything, fine. I'm worried about the actor, I'm worried about but I'm always worried about, you're worried about the same things: where the camera's going, what is my actor doing, what is the pacing of the scene, worrying about the end result, what is your audience feeling at this moment. And that's key. And that's not going to be any different if you have 100 people or if you have 2. Just sitting there watching your film, you have to be able to edit your film and see your film in the moment when you're doing this shot, knowing when you're cutting away, knowing when you're cutting it back, because you're the one seeing the film that's unfinished for the audience before the audience sees it. And that's all about engaging them that I'm talking about, hitting the tone, the vision, that's that moment. But beyond that, it's just like, with 100 people, you have a lot more people doing things, so a lot more is possible in a shorter amount of time. When you have 2 people, you need to be smarter about, Sentinel is a good example. Sentinel, there was, I think, 8 of us total, but a lot of people just helping carry stuff. Mostly it was just about 4 filmmakers and 1 actor in the middle of nowhere with just a camera and a boom mic. That's it. And I think we shot it in 2 days, maybe 1 day, I don't know. And we spent money on what the actor was wearing and food. That's it. Everything else was just $0. We just went and did it. I don't even think there was a script. I just made a bullet point of generally what I wanted to happen, and we just went out and did it. And that didn't feel too much different than Ballistic, which was this larger budget short film with this huge crew. Because again, it's all boiling down to, what do I want my audience to feel in this moment? So, I mean, I guess my point here is, whether you have a ton of resources or no resources, I just don't think I think there's excuses you can make, but those excuses aren't valid, because I think Sentinel holds up to Ballistic as far as quality. Ballistic is obviously longer and we spent more time on telling a story. Sentinel is far more of a sequence, like what we're doing here with the 60-second sequence. Actually, Ballistic was the cheaper camera. That was a C200. So it just doesn't matter.
Yeah, we were just talking about cameras and, the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, which is actually in the list of prizes.
Yeah.
But that's a camera around $1,300. And then we were talking about the A7S and how, that can stand its own when it's mixed in with other fancier footage from these fancy cinema cameras. So the point, I guess, is there's no excuses. You could make this on your iPhone, right?
Exactly.
And it's very encouraging to hear that, you maybe submitting this to Collective could be the step to doing something bigger, to maybe making a commercial with a 10-person crew, etc. And I love how you're a very multifaceted creative type, right? So you don't just direct, you don't just edit, you don't just produce, but you're also a writer.
Yeah.
And so with action sequences, of course, there's not a ton of things to write out, but how do you think people could maybe incorporate dialogue, or maybe how do they really write out a story when there's not much of a story, right?
Right.
It's an action sequence.
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with couch time and your gut. Couch time meaning sitting there and watching the movie before anything, over and over and over. Grab a track, a song of some kind. Could be anything. Soundtrack. A song that you like that fits the tone of what you're probably not going to end up using. Obviously, you're not going to end up reusing it because you're not going to have. You're not going to want to pay those copyright fees.
The license, yeah.
But it's something that carries the tone of the thing you're trying to make, and you sit there playing it over and over again. And you watch this piece in your head over and over and over again. And then it ends up being a lot about your gut, what feels right, what doesn't. And that's when you find those moments. When you're watching it and it starts feeling sort of boring to you when you're watching it in your head, it's going to be boring to your audience. So that's when you need that moment. Maybe that pause where they catch the punch and they look at each other for a moment before you kick off again. I love what Peter Berg says about pulling back the bow until he finally lets it go and then the arrow's just flying. But pulling back that bow is really, really important. So finding the moments where you pull back the bow, and you might be pulling back the bow multiple times. One of the examples that we could post out, I'm sure, is this 1-minute section of a short film I did called Hall Fight, which is the worst title of all time. But it's more of an action sequence. Again, it's not really like this huge story or anything, but there's a 1-minute piece that's its own standalone fight scene. And there's about 2 pauses in it in total in 1 minute. And one of them is, she's fighting them all at once, and then she knocks down 2 of them, and then there's 1 left. And they have that moment where they stand off right before we go into what I consider like act 3 of the fight. And you could think of it in those terms of, even though it's 60 seconds, you can think of it as act 1 lead into the act 2, which is the main bulk of the fight, which gives us a pause right before we lead into, that crescendo moment, that moment that leaves us with like, wow, that was really badass.
Yeah.
But I feel like having that, and it doesn't have to be this huge moment. It could literally just be that moment where he catches the fist and it's like, oh my God, I actually did this. And they look at each other and then there you go again. That could be enough. But it's finding those beats, I think, is when you find those is when you're doing, that couch time moment. And, you can write a script, you can write a 1-pager for this if you wanted to, but you could also just bullet point it and find it in the moment and work with your talent to sort of block it out and figure out what works best, especially if you have some people who have skill with, fighting, maybe people who are trained in martial arts or whatever it is.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah. I mean, pull on your circuit of friends.
Yeah.
Who has the black belt? you know. In terms of YouTube and filmmaking, it's really cool that we've seen a lot of overlap in the past 10 years. And I think you've really been at the center of it with a few other YouTube channels, and people have moved on and been, I almost said like legitimate filmmakers, and I don't want to say that because YouTubers can be legitimate filmmakers, and you're also a legitimate filmmaker, right? But I love the crossover because I'm a big fan of, it doesn't matter what camera you have, it doesn't matter if you're in the system, you can still tell a good story and you can put it out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so can you tell us a little bit about your YouTube journey? How did you start, and what has it evolved into today?
It started pre-Film Riot. I did some comedy series. I used to work at a company called Alienware, so I did some comedy series for them that went
Alienware, the computer company?
Yeah. I ran
that's cool.
I ran their video studio for I think 3 years.
Wow.
So I did some stuff for them, and then I started doing my own thing called Making the Film, which is a terrible title.
I
think we showed the first episode of that in an episode of Film Riot, like maybe 2 years ago. It's so bad. But Rev3 got wind of what I was doing because of that, and it did pretty well because that was back when YouTube would feature stuff on the front page, which they don't do anymore. But they would feature stuff back then, and so we got featured a few times, and that helped us get some steam in there. And Rev3 got wind of it, and then helped us evolve that into what became Film Riot, a much better name, and what the show could be, and helped us cultivate that for what is the online community, at least at the time. And at the time, it was just like the videos lived on Rev3's website. I pushed for a while for it to go on to YouTube because I came from YouTube. And I saw the value in that and seeing what the views were and having that community that you could interact with that didn't need to be specifically this website. And so it took a couple of episodes, and then we were on YouTube. And I just started the show just because, one, I wanted to, catalog my journey toward making feature films ultimately, and there was nothing like that at the time. You had Indie Mogul, but they were more about like props and stuff like that. It wasn't really that sort of thing. It didn't seem like they were wanting to do like features or anything. So it was just like I would have killed for something like that pre-film school. And I didn't want to make something where it was like, I'm your film professor and here's exactly how you do this. I wanted to make something where it was like, I don't know what I'm doing. You don't know what you're doing, but let's figure this thing out.
They're on the journey with you.
Exactly.
Right?
And it's like what we were talking about earlier is, that opener used to say, you want to be a filmmaker, so do I, let's figure it out. And that's always been kind of the idea behind, what we do with Film Riot is, it's one thing that's comforting. The further I get along in this, and the higher up people that I work with, the more impressive people that I work with, none of us really know what we're doing. Ever. You're always figuring it out because even the taste of the audience is constantly changed. Technology is always moving forward, so you're always figuring out again and again and again. So there's there's a comfort in the fact that none of us really fully know what we're doing.
It's taking that first step, right?
Yeah.
And really just, I remember my dad had his Canon T3i, and it was so scary to shoot with it. And so I started editing, and editing really became my hub and like my safe haven because it made so much more sense to me.
Would you start on Premiere?
Final Cut.
Oh, okay.
7, actually.
Yeah. I actually started on Premiere when I was young. My dad went out and figured it out because I was just obsessed with. He went out and figured it out, got one of the first versions of Premiere for me. And then
that's when it came in a box.
Final Cut. Yes.
You would literally buy a physical box with software.
The heaviest box ever with all these different things and these huge books that you're just like, I'm not reading that.
Exactly.
Let's figure it out. Who's got time for that?
Yeah, I took an A for V class in high school. And so they had Final Cut Pro 7, which was pretty expensive.
Yeah.
And so, I would go into class and stay after to just use the software. And I remember the best day ever is when I graduated from iMovie, because that's all that I had on my computer at home. And I bought Final Cut Express, which they sold for $200. So it was like a watered down version.
Right.
And then once I mastered that, that's when they went to 10. And I was like, I don't know what to do.
Where is everything?
And then that's when Premiere,
I was Final Cut 7 until 10 came out, and I was like, all right, well, back to Premiere we go.
Exactly. And so I just remember for 2 or 3 years, I really just edited, and then I would just point a camera and be like, that looks okay. And so I think just taking the first step and maybe finding out what you truly like about the process, because that's what I like about filmmaking is it can be a one-man, one-woman show, or you can collaborate with people and you can film someone who's a really good filmer and a really good editor, and you just produce it.
Yeah. I mean, over the course of time, I mean, when I was much younger, there wasn't stuff like this, like the stuff that you put out, where there's so much information and you could really figure out whatever it is and get all that. Oh, I know what these roles do. You know, there wasn't anything like that. So I didn't know what a director was when I was younger and starting out. I just knew I want to do this, and I want to, you know, I saw films that give me a certain feeling. I want to give that to people and get them to see exactly how I'm seeing as, you know, something. And it wasn't for a while that I figured out that, oh, that's a director. And then I went to film school, and then, you know, lost all the comment. Maybe I'm not a director. And then at a time I thought maybe I'm a cinematographer, and I chased that for a bit. I'm like, no, and I would always go back to directing. Well, maybe I'm an editor. I'm definitely not a writer, but now I'm writing because I have to, because I don't have one. And I'm editing because I have to. And then you just slowly over time you start figuring out, I mean, to your point, like, oh, this is what I am. Like, I'm a writer, director, and I produce. You know, I have an editor now. That's not what I do. I can edit. I've edited for other people in larger productions, but that's not what I do. I'm glad I know how to do it to the degree that I can, because it really helps me as a director.
People, right? And you can tell them what to do and how to do it.
Exactly.
And it really helps when you're, you don't have to be an expert, but, and I love that you have a fancy color grading thing over there. That's cool. Are you getting more into color grading and stuff? Playing around with it?
I love that stuff. And I mean, I do it all for Film Riot still, which is the best part about Film Riot is I'm forced to continue to do these things on a daily basis. I can't just focus on these other things. I'm also doing this, so I'm constantly, you know, sharpening the knife and constantly staying up to date with what's going on and toying around with different things, and, you know, with Resolve, toying around with color of the image, and, you know, what if I push this a little more green instead of what I usually do, which is a little more blue, and, you know, playing with those things, it just fills up what I'm always calling like the toolbox of ideas, you know, your filmmaker toolbox. And I think doing this, I mean, we just did an episode where we did sort of a sword and shield type look, you know, Game of Thronesy, you know, type thing.
Can I say I was shocked that it was paper?
Okay, yeah.
Shocked, because when I first saw the scene, I was like, wow, did they rent out a dungeon for this?
Right.
And you're like, yeah, you can like buy this paper at like Costco.
Yeah, $17.
What?
Yeah, and it's limiting, and, you know, if you shoot it wrong, it's a little cheesy. Right. But I think even, you know, being stuck with those limitations, and oh man, I only have $100. I can't make a short film. No, that's the best way to make a short film. Like I said, the one that we put out, that, you know, it's one of our highest viewed shorts, is 1-point-something million views on it. It was $200, and a couple people in a field that we didn't pay for. It was just some friend that was like, yeah, you can go shoot out there for a day. So we did. And you know, doing stuff like that, it just builds all these ideas, and again sharpens that problem solving and creative knife to when you are able to go on to do larger projects like Ballistic. Things always go wrong. It doesn't matter how many people you have. I mean, one of the guys on set worked on Titanic. The other guys were, you know, working on all kinds of feature films. So so these are like legit people. And every, you know, production I've been on with those level of people, there's still, things fall apart, things go wrong. That's just the nature of the beast. It's unpredictable. So you have to be able to think on your toes, and doing stuff like that does sharpen that knife to where in that moment you're like, you know what, if we do this, this, and this, it'll work. And then other people are like, I don't think it's going to work. You keep trust me. And then it works because you're used to, you know, bubble gum and popsicle sticks, MacGyver filmmaking. And it really helps you, you know, figure things out when the sun's going down, you have 20 minutes, there's no time for the gaffer to run back to the truck and get the thing, the light will be gone by the time he gets back, and you get to be the one that be like, do these things. And then boom, and it works, and you're good.
And the more tools in the toolbox, the faster you'll be able to respond to those things. And that's what I love about collective contests, is it's literally like a contest every single month where, yes, again, prizes, heck yes, but you're having more tools in the toolbox. With every contest, you're trying something new. It's action this month, maybe next month it's a rom-com vibe. And all of those are tools in the toolbox that ultimately lead to something really special. Could lead to a career. Speaking of careers, it's amazing that, you know, we have YouTube careers. Great, love it. But for those people out there who are like you, they're like, there's something special about showing a film in a theater. There's something special about that hour-and-a-half length, you know. What, first of all, drew you to that? And, you know, what is it that's still so prevalent in your life? And it's just like, you know, you want to do it. Why? Why Ryan?
You know, I'm not 100% sure. Like, I know, I remember I used to always love to entertain my family, which I'm sure a ton of us did, where you do your plays and they all pretend to like it. And, you know, they wouldn't laugh at times or they wouldn't react at times where I'm like, you should be. And then I was just like, they're just not seeing what I'm seeing. And then my dad brought home a camera and I was really young. I think my mom said I was younger than this, but I'm pretty sure I was like 8-ish. But he brought home our first VHS camera, which is actually behind us. Cool. And, you know, I looked through the viewfinder and it was like this, you know, light bulb went off. I was like, oh my God, I can make people see, I can force them to literally see what I'm seeing. And it was just that idea of expressing in that way that really intrigued me. And then when I saw Jurassic Park when I was 11, which is why my obsession from Jurassic Park comes from, I had never, my parents were very, very strict about what I watched, but I was obsessed with dinosaurs. So when they saw it, they just couldn't bring themselves not to let me see it. But I think if they knew what the movie was, really, they wouldn't have let me see it. It was way more violent and way more intense than anything I'd ever seen.
Yeah, it's pretty intense.
So I was so unsafe in this entirely safe place with all these people that also felt the same way. And, you know, this guy went up to go to the bathroom or go get a drink. And when he came back, it was like one of the intense raptor scenes. And he comes behind his girlfriend and bah, she launches up the seat. And half the row launches up their seat. And everybody's laughing. So it was just this experience that this dude named Spielberg gave this entire group of people. And it was just, even at 11, that had such an impact on me of like, you could take us somewhere else entirely and give us this unreal experience that was invaluable to me because I was just obsessed with it after the fact. Saw the movie like 6 or 7 more times in theaters, and you're escaping to this whole other place, and be able to bring that to people is pretty amazing to me. So it's not like, you know, you can say what you want to say, but for me, it's more about asking questions with my stories and actually like full on saying something. It's like more like, what do you think? Instead of being like, here's how you should live your life. But mostly it's what I keep saying. It's engaging the audience, giving your audience something. And of course, not everybody's going to like it. Some people are going to, if you're doing your job, you know, a good amount of people are going to love it, and there's going to be a good amount of people that are going to hate it because that's just the nature of it. Art is subjective. Yeah.
But at least you're getting a reaction out of it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I always say the most depressing thing to me was if everybody was like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I would rather you hate it than say, yeah, okay. Right. I want a reaction of some kind. But, you know, to give people that escape for X amount of time, to go somewhere else and, you know, life can be pretty, you know, not the best. But to have that hour and a half or 2 hours where you just get to sit down and, you know, escape elsewhere, whether you're laughing, you know, crying, smiling, or jumping out of your seat, there's just something so special and amazing about that I've just, you know, been chasing for forever.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, especially with YouTube and a lot of how-to videos, a lot of people do want that roadmap, right? Do this, do that. Boom, you're a feature filmmaker.
Yeah, not a thing.
Not a thing, right? And I think also it's a very relational industry, and so not only it can be. So sometimes it's not even about making as much as possible, but it's also making sure that, hey, like maybe you're a director, but like you said, maybe you're DP that film. You're going to meet someone, you know, great.
100%.
And so what have you found for you? What have been kind of like the turnkey moments that are like, wow, I did that and I met this producer that's leading me to this, and now I'm on a plane to LA. Wow. What have been some of those moments?
I think, you know, relationship wise, it's been about, you know, doing for other people as much as possible and, you know, bringing people along. You know, it's not my film, it's our film. If you're making a film with a group of people, especially when you're bringing in, you know, producers, cinematographers, if you're working with a writer, an editor, it's you guys. It's all of your film. It's not your film anymore.
Y'all's film. We're in Texas.
It's y'all's film.
It's y'all's film.
Yeah. I mean, you're the captain of the ship. You're steering the vision, and everybody, you know, you're making sure everybody's staying in the same lane, but you have to collaborate. You have to. It's, you know, you can't sit there and, because you'll strangle it to death, basically. And you know, that has been the relationships I built to help increase the quality of my work and to learn more, and, you know, to get things to the level that Ballistic was because of the collaborations I made, and, you know, doing for others, and I'll do this for you, and hey, let me help you with that. And then you're like, hey, I'm doing this thing, and they're in. Yeah, I'll do that with you. And again, making it everybody's film, something that everybody could be proud of. But before I even got to that point to where I was really collaborating, I worked really hard getting myself to the point to where, you know, I was worth their time.
Right.
You know, that I felt like, hey, you want to come do this with me? In the end, you're not going to be, you know, embarrassed.
Yeah,
and I could show them like, here's the stuff I've made. If you hate it, then you will be embarrassed. So don't bother. But if you like it,
but
you
that's
know,
a good
this
key,
is the stuff I've made.
A portfolio, right?
Exactly.
And so a lot of times you're not going to get paid for those first gigs.
No.
People aren't going to be asking you for it.
No.
So it's on you to go out and do it. So when those opportunities come up, you can be, hey, look what I've done.
Totally.
You know?
And even Ballistic, you know, most, if not all of the above the line positions did it for free. I had a bit of a budget, so I offered what I could to a few of them, and all of them said, put it on screen. Don't pay that to me. Put it back toward the film. And you know, below the line, we paid everyone, but you know, the cinematographer, editor, my stunt coordinator, all of them, producers were like, put it toward the film. I don't want it. And
That's
you know, because everybody came together with passion, because you know there was something that everybody believed in.
Right.
So building that has been the big relationship thing for me. But as far as other connections, you know, I'm managed now, and you know, dealing with different producers, things like that. That has come just by doing stuff and putting it out there, doing more stuff and putting it out there, and doing more stuff and putting it out there. And I remember a buddy of mine was kind enough to send one of my past short films to a producer friend of his, and his response was, I like it, not yet. And I wasn't crushed by that. I was like, okay, not yet. I get you. And you know, it clicked. It was like, I got it. I got you. There's still notches in the belt that I haven't quite hit just yet. I need to shore up those things. And, you know, I set about this plan of like, what am I missing here? What do I need to like get better at? Who do I need to bring in to, you know, increase the things I can't take to 100%? You know, maybe I could take it to 80 because, you know, jack of all trades like we all are, but I can't get that to 100. So who do I need to bring? So, you know, that stuff is really, really helpful. But, you know, I think one of the best things that you could do for a short film is to get somebody to write a blog on it. That's been the biggest help for me, is people just writing an article. Because although some people think that they're not really looking at online content as much to bring into bigger things, they are.
Right.
I've, you know, learned recently that there are like, you know, little departments of a couple of people that their job is to, you know, go read, you know, film blogs, go watch YouTube films.
Ooh, hot tip.
And then
there you go.
Yeah, and then they pass it along to their bosses, the producers.
Right.
And that's how I've made connections, not through people I already knew, but just from doing work and putting it out there. And thankfully somebody saw it and passed it along to their boss. And then I got a connection that way. So my higher up connections mostly came from my work. Even though I have friends in the industry, they came from just doing the work, putting my head down, doing the work and putting it out there, and really focusing on, you know, not, I need this to be in a theater, but how do I engage my audience? Right. Because that's what they're looking for. Yeah. Can you lock me in? Am I engaged? Do you know how to tell this story? So you just do and do and do. Again, what's so great about Collective, because it also keeps you from doing the same thing over and over again. Because like you said, it's action this time. Who knows what it's going to be next time? And I think that's really important.
Yeah. I'm almost like, I should submit something action.
That
is so out of my ballpark. Okay, so after this, Ryan, let's do an action scene together.
Let's do it.
Putting you on the spot. So for inspo, can you maybe provide a movie? Like, what's your favorite action movie? And maybe another short film of yours, or maybe a video that they could go and watch for inspo, for some tips. What's your favorite action movie?
Currently, of recent time, I think Mission Impossible Fallout was absolutely incredible.
It was so good.
The action sequences in there are amazing. And although some of them are huge stunts that are completely out of the realm of possibility of what we could do at this time, my favorite action sequence in the whole thing is the one we broke down, which is a good video to go watch, which is how to shoot an action scene or how to direct an action scene.
My favorite thing is when
it's the bathroom fight scene.
He reloads his arms. Yeah, reloads his arms.
Which apparently he just did in the moment and they liked and kept.
That's so funny.
Which is funny because some of the best stuff is always the stuff that just comes in the moment. But yeah, that hand-to-hand fight scene is my favorite sequence in the whole film. And you know, it cost some money with the things that they were breaking, but you know, overall it was just, you know, it was a hand-to-hand fight scene. I think Die Hard is an incredible action film. Speed, The Matrix, Die Hard 3, the Bourne films, the Raid films are incredible. There's a ton out there, but I would say of John Wick films, Atomic Blonde has one of my favorite fight scenes because unlike Die Hard and Atomic Blonde, I love so much because there's a realism to it. There's not like, you know, I'm getting punched in the face 20 times and I'm good to go.
Right.
Whereas like the end of that one fight scene at the end of Atomic Blonde Charlize Theron and the villain can hardly even stand up anymore. And I just love that so much. Like bringing, even in Fallout does it a bit as well. Although it's a different type of film, it's a little more, fantasy, a little more glossy. But in that bathroom fight scene, the two heroes are having one hell of a time. Like they're not. If it wasn't two of them, they just would have lost. This guy was like beating the hell out of them. And I love that when you really give your hero a hard time. It's not like a car fell on them and they're like, I'm good.
I'm fine. Casual.
That stuff is some of my favorite stuff. But those films. And, we do, Ballistic has a bunch of behind the scenes, and we do talk a bit about action, how to direct action. And then we did a whole action month back in, I think, 2015. Hall Fight is one of those. And we have behind the scenes where we talk about shooting fight scenes on those as well.
So wrapping stuff up, what are maybe some things in your kit that people will be surprised by? I know, first of all, what's your main go-to camera for shooting Film Riot stuff?
I don't really have one. We swap out a lot. Yeah. Recently, we've been using the Blackmagic pocket camera.
Okay. Which is on the prize list.
Which is on the prize list, funny enough.
Yeah.
I just adore that camera. It's crazy that is like $1,200, $1,300 camera, and it stands up and even in some places surpasses my C300 Mark II, which is like what, 12 grand or something. It's just it's been blowing my mind. So that's what we've been using a lot lately. But we also have the C300. I adore the C300. We shot Ballistic with that. But if all you have is an iPhone, make your film. Again, it's about engaging the audience, and the camera doesn't engage the audience. How you pace it, what's in front of the camera. That's what engages the audience. As far as like surprising gear, shower curtains for diffusion, I still use to this day. You buy some foam at Home Depot and you cut either a pizza box or a stop sign bounce, and I still use those to this day. I actually have never bought a bounce. We've only made our own. Wow. And they're fantastic. Black sheets for negative fill. I mean, you don't have to go out and buy the stuff to get these things. And if you're shooting outside, which a lot of us do when we don't have light kits, something like a shower curtain and a black sheet will take you so far. You'd be shocked. We have an episode that, maybe we could throw a link to somewhere where we show that just using a shower curtain outside instead of the sunlight just beaming right on your face, using that, a little bit of negative fill, and it looks like you lit that thing. So that's really great. And then for camera, some kind of rigging to get your hands away from the camera, because a lot of us are shooting on things like the Blackmagic Pocket camera. And if your hands are on that, you're getting that jitter, that unnatural feeling jitter instead of that nice smooth movement. So getting your hands off of that somehow, which, in the past, I've taken my tripod and, removed these legs, put the other leg over my shoulder, and now I had a shoulder rig.
Yep.
So you do what you got to do. It doesn't have to be this crazy gear. You just figure it out.
Yeah. Love it. Ryan, thank you so much for being a part of this. I'm so excited to see your submissions out there. Make sure to go to collective.lacie.com/action scene. Submit today, and you have a month to create. Go out there and get it. What's your outro?
Write, shoot, edit, repeat.
Write, shoot, edit, repeat. You heard it from Ryan himself.
You did.
Subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube.
Click that like button.
Click that like button.
Smash it.